This is only the second one of these I've ever done, so I'm not quite sure if there's anybody actually out there or not. Anyway, I've had a very bad head cold that I'm still getting over, as you can probably tell, so apologise for my voice. This was supposed to be using a piece of software and very high tech. I downloaded the piece of software, but since I've been sick, I haven't had a chance to even find out how it works. So it's going to be just a regular me and a camera type scenario. I wanted to talk about the book, which has just come out, Dowsing the Wyrd Web in Moravia. The book itself is an account of my experiences over the last couple of 3 years, dowsing energy lines here in Moravia, which is in the south of the Czech Republic. And it's divided into a couple of parts. The first part gets into some terminology and how to dowse, because we need to make sure that we're all speaking the same language. There's a lot of words that get used in dowsing, like alignment, ley line, that kind of thing. I'm not saying my definitions are correct. I'm just simply saying these are my definitions and the ones that I use in the book. I then talk about how to do dowsing before getting into the fact that dowsing has turned out to be something that has completely changed my life and has been a journey into myself and into connecting with planet Earth, I guess. As I say, I'm recovering from a pretty bad virus cold thing, so excuse my voice and occasional coughs. Anyway, what I really wanted to tell you in the book was that I have come to the conclusion that this web of energy lines, this web of Earth energy lines, whatever they are, it really doesn't matter what they are, seems to have an intelligence. And it's almost as if this web of energy lines is like the basis on which our reality is created. Hence, I call it the web of Wyrd, spun by the Sisters of Fate or the Sisters of Wyrd. And I came to this conclusion for many, many reasons. One, when I've been dowsing out in the countryside, I have often found that where I parked my car in looking for the lines was where the line turned out to be. When I've looked for the lines and sort of extrapolated where the line might go on a map and then jumped over a road or two to try to find where the line is, and I haven't been able to find it because it's shifted in azimuth or direction, and I've parked the car to have another look at the map, that's usually where the line is. So it almost seems like some kind of an interesting game I'm playing here, but I've come to the conclusion that what's probably going on is that subconsciously I already know about these lines. I already know where the lines are. It's just consciously I don't. So when I park my car, subconsciously, I know I'm parking in the line. I know I'm parking in the place that I'm looking for, but consciously, of course, it's a big surprise when I get out and douse and find, hey, presto, there's the line. As I'm dowsing these lines, I often come across feathers, lots and lots of butterflies, these kind of signs and synchronicities. Also, lots of potential things that seem to have been left by the shaman that I interact with from time to time here in Brno. So, to some extent, it seems to me that I already know where the lines are. We all do. And in fact, when I was dowsing last summer and met an old gentleman who wanted to know what I was doing, he told me in no uncertain terms that the way the old people knew where these lines were is they watched where the animals congregated, sat down and seemed to settle, because the animals knew where the lines were. And again, this would suggest that these lines are real, tangible, and have intelligence. When I was talking with a house healer, Tim, we had a conversation. He said, why do you follow the lines? And the reason why I follow the lines is because there's another aspect to the lines that I think is important. Where do the lines go? And this is important for two reasons. One, I have discovered that the lines often go to places that are important to me in my past, or important to someone who is with me regarding their past, or important to somebody who's in my life and their past. So the best example, and I've made a video about this, is what I call my daughter's line. I was looking for one of the lines that I knew went through Brindle. I could not find it. And one day I had to take my daughter to an entrance examination that the school she'd chosen. It was raining. She asked me if I would stay until the break so that she could tell me how the first exam went. And I did. And I thought to myself, what am I going to do for an hour? So I thought, I know what, even though it's raining, I'll jump out the car and I'll do a spot of dowsing. And it was then that I found the line I'd been looking for. And over the next couple of days that weekend, I followed this line. And I broke into tears a couple of times because it took me to the place that she was conceived in, the place she was born in, the house she grew up in. This line was somehow intimately associated with my daughter's life. And I give other examples of this in the book. So these lines seem to have some fate aspect to them. So when I call them the Wyrd Web, spun by the Sisters of Wyrd, spun by the Sisters of Fate, then that is basically evidence for that. I'm just going to say good evening. There we go. The other thing is where the lines go also seems to have significance. Now, I find that these lines are in pairs. I call them male and female, positive and negative, whatever the terminology you want to use, but that's the terminology I tend to have adopted, for better or for worse. The negative lines tend to pass through things like hospitals, schools, children's playgrounds, places where there are crosses, whether memorial crosses, roadside crosses, spiritual crosses, whatever those crosses might be. They tend to track through streams, through ponds, through springs, through wells, anything to do with water, and usually in the valley. Excuse me, sorry about my cough. The positive lines, or the male lines, tend to follow the high ground where the oak trees are. They tend to pass through government buildings, city halls, places of jurisdiction, courts, that kind of thing, castles, places of law and order. So you get this very distinct difference between these pairs. The other thing that has become very apparent almost without exception is that the female lines pass through churches which exclusively seem to have female saint names, and the male lines pass through churches which almost exclusively have male saint names. The exception being things like Sacred Heart, Holy Trinity, and this is usually the female line that passes through those as well. So it's almost as if either the lines know where they're going, or the people that built the churches somehow knew about the line and the characteristics of the line and what the line was bringing in terms of energy to that particular location. So I find that following the line tells me quite a lot. It tells me a lot about me, myself, who I am, what my relationship is to the lines. And it tells me about the nature of that specific line in terms of, for example, the Templar line, or the Templar alignment, which is 2 lines, seems to be associated with Templars, the Teutonic order of knights, and also with this particular aristocratic family that was of some importance in the 900s to 1300s here in Moravia, called the Lords of Hradec, because every time these lines node and cross, they seem to cross at places that have some significance either to the Templars, the Teutonic Knights, or this particular family, the Lords of Hradec. Now, why would that be? How can that be? And so you start to really wonder what on earth is going on here. This is like I'm having like this wonderful magical adventure. It's like a movie. It's like being in a movie. It's like being in on a magical mystery tour, and it's taking you into yourself and teaching you about yourself. It's taking you into your local environment and teaching you about the history and the culture and the evolution of society in the area that these lines pass through. And it's taking you into nature. It's exposing you to places of beauty and spirituality that you didn't even know exist, even though they're perhaps only 3 kilometers away from where you actually live. And the more I follow these lines, the more I find this to be true. So what I did in the book was I went into looking at those kind of relationships. I talked about the nodes and the vortices and what they were and how they're formed. And I sought all kinds of examples in the Czech Republic that I thought were notable that I'd discovered along the way. So places like Svatý Hostín, Kretiny, the church in Jindřichův Hradec, that I always say JH because I find it pretty hard to say that Czech town name. These are all places with distinct history, with distinct meaning, and of great spiritual value. These are often places where, for centuries, people have been going. Pilgrims have been taking time out of their lives to go there and visit and worship and pray. And the question to ask is, why would that be? Why are we surrounded by all these lines that nobody really seems to acknowledge exist from a conscious point of view, but subconsciously many of us know that they're there? Otherwise, why would we build churches on top of nodes? Why would we cite city halls on top of positive lines or hospitals on negative lines? How can this be? It's beyond bizarre because it's so consistent. I can almost go into a village or a town here following a line, and I already know that probably there's going to be a city hall or a village hall through which the male line goes through, and the cemetery, and there'll be a school for the kids and a playground that the female line goes through, and there'll probably be a memorial cross to victims of World War II and I, and that will also be on the negative line. It's that consistent. And this has got me because I'm a scientist as well as a spiritual interested person, and it's got me from both angles. Why is this the case? And I read this book, The Way of Wyrd, many years ago, and was completely turned on by it. I thought it was a wonderful, wonderful book with deep meaning. And it talked about these lines of power, these lines of energy that the shamans in northeast England used. And so the similarities between these energy lines and this web of Wyrd has kind of become, one's become synonymous with the other for me. So now I call this thing the Web of Wyrd, and what I'm doing is dowsing the Web of Wyrd. And what I'm doing in the process is I'm on a spiritual journey of discovery. And that journey has three aspects to it. One, I'm learning about myself, and it's changing me fundamentally from the inside out. I'm learning about my role within this landscape, and that's also very important. What does this landscape mean to me? How do I interact with it? And then thirdly, it's teaching me about the nature of these energies themselves and how to use these energies and what their purpose might well be. I'm just going to read. Yes, absolutely. Following natural law, I agree. Anyway, the conclusion that I came to was that, I guess I should say something else. The other thing that I've noticed in the last 3 or 4 years is how 1,000 years ago, when the Slavs had the kingdom of Moravia in this particular part of the world, they would build their churches always on these energy lines, not the big wide energy lines, the type 4 lines, but smaller ones, 15 pace wide, 8 pace wide type lines. Every single Slavic era church, whether it's in an archaeological site and basically just the remains of it, or whether it's an existing building today, is built on one of these energy lines. They almost always follow the aisle. Sometimes there's a crossing line, sometimes there's multiple crossing lines, and there's a node just in front of where the altar would have been. So plainly, the Slavs knew about these lines. They placed their churches on them in a particular arrangement. When we look at the Templar order, not only did they know about these lines, but they seemed to know how to accentuate the energy of these lines where they noded. They knew about sacred architecture. They knew how to build a cathedral with a particular architecture that would accentuate the energy that was at that particular point in space and time. And based on the work I've done here at the Church of St. John the Baptist in JH, I would also suggest that they worked with frequencies, solfeggio frequencies, that also help to accentuate the energy at those particular locations. So if in the past we humans have known how to work, or some of us humans anyway, have known how to work with these energies and found them important enough to build massive structures around, and let's face it, if we go further back, we're talking about places like Stonehenge, pyramids, really significant buildings for the time they were built in. If we put that much effort into building structures around these energy vortices, then they must have a purpose. They must be worth spending that amount of effort on, right? And so it strikes me that the work that people like Rory Duff are doing with his network and trying to get people to meditate on these particular sites at various times of the year when the lines are all oscillating together in times of harmony, which tends to fall on the four key dates, the solstices and the equinoxes. This seems to me to be a call for all of us to get involved in this effort and to actually go out there, particularly now with what's going on in the world. The world is mad and upside down and chaotic, and it's lost its way. Humanity is becoming inhuman. We need to find a way to restore humanity. And I would argue that the reason why many of us are getting interested in these lines and these energies is because it's imperative that we go back to understanding what the purpose of these things are. They are the infrastructure behind everything. They are the infrastructure behind our reality. They have a purpose that can be utilized for the benefit of humanity, and that is to go there at certain times of the year, or any time of the year actually, and simply meditate. Meditate and prayer. Pray for peace, for love, pray for understanding at these particular locations. I really think that this is the purpose of these lines. And I think in the past, humanity knew what that purpose was. And in essence, that's what the book is about. I've described the book. It's in 3 parts. It's a sort of definition to begin with, how to dowse, what a line is, all that kind of stuff. Let's get our terminology correct. Then it's how I've discovered the intelligence behind these lines and the historical and cultural and spiritual significance of them. And then what it's meant to me and to others like me, how it's changed me, how it's changed other people, and how important they are to the future of humanity. So that's really what I wanted to say. I hope there's actually some people out there listening. It doesn't really matter, I guess. I suppose this will go up on YouTube anyway, and people will get to see it. I think there are a couple of you out there, so if anybody's got any questions, I'll need to put my glasses on. I'd be happy to answer any questions that I can. I can't guarantee that I will be able to answer all the questions, but I'll certainly do my best. The other thing I want to point out is, even though I tend to write books and blogs and make videos and stuff, and maybe come across all spiritual and nice and warm and wonderful, I'm human like anybody else. I'm neither good nor bad. Some days I'm good, some days I'm bad, and I'm always working on myself. I'm not aware of all of my problems, none of us are, but I try each and every day to be better, and working with these lines certainly helps in understanding myself, understanding my strengths and weaknesses, and making decisions about where to go next in life. So if there are any questions, please do type them out there, and I'll do my best to answer while I take a sip of tea. Well, nobody's typing, but it does look like there's some people out there, apparently. So once again, if you have a question, please just type. Well, thanks. I am very human, and I think I'm down to earth. In fact, I'm a Yorkshireman, and one of my bad sides is I don't have much. What's the word? I'm not good with foolish people. I call a spade a bloody spade, like all Yorkshiremen, and I'm not. I don't suffer fools. So I've got a bit of a temper, and I have to. Well, I don't know. Righteous anger sometimes is okay, but that's what I need to work on, and I'm totally aware of it. So I'm just a human being trying to do my best, and I think at this particular point in time, those of us that have these sort of feelings and these sort of leanings, we need to put our money where our mouth is, and we need to start working for change by changing ourselves for the better and working with these energies at these locations. And B, we need to go back to the idea of prayer or affirmation, and use the purpose of prayer and affirmation to try to spread the energy around the globe, around the web of Wyrd. Have I found any churches which have been built on megalith sites? Well, that's an interesting question. The problem with the Czech Republic and this part of the world in general is, on the one hand, Rory Duff tells me, be careful, Gary. You'll have hordes of holiday-making dowsers coming out to visit you because it's such a wonderful virgin area to work with, and that's true. The problem is that the communists ruled this part of the world for quite a period of time, as you probably know. And they didn't have much respect for history or culture. So a lot of records have unfortunately been destroyed. And what records are left are not that well known. And they're also sometimes in Czech, hidden away in Czech archives. And because I'm not a native speaker of Czech, I'm not good at finding some of these hidden archives. Not hidden, but they're opaque to someone like me. So on a lot of these sites, it's actually quite hard to get much of a history beyond what's in something like Wikipedia, which is pretty unreliable. Although sometimes I get lucky and I do find some good sources. In particular, university students doing MSCs have often written theses about particular sites like the Templerstein Castle, the Templars Castle here in Moravia, that kind of thing. So you do get some information. So almost all of the churches that have real significance, like Svatý Hostin, JH, they're all located on sites that have history, Celtic history, Slavic history, going back into the Stone Age. The problem is finding any real detail on that history is extremely difficult. Now, one of the Templar alignment nodes is actually on a hill where there is a church that's 17th, 16th century. And I can find no history about that hill. But if you go visit there, and I've actually made a video so you can have a look for yourself, there's a well there that's made of a natural spring on the top of this hill. And there are some stones, some very large stones that look like the kind of thing that might have been megalithic or a dolmen type structure. I can't prove it though. It's just a gut feeling. So I would say, yes, I think almost all of these churches of significance are built upon more ancient sites. But I cannot give you much detail for the reasons I've just outlined. Apologies. Are there any other questions? That was a good one, actually. I can see there's still a few of you left. I haven't bored the pants off everybody. I'm not used to doing this. It is a kind of weird feeling that you're talking to yourself, which is a bit disturbing. Anyway, we're coming up on about half an hour, so I guess that will more or less wrap this up. I'm going to try to do this, not too regularly, but I'm going to try to do this from time to time. I found an energy line, cleft trees and gaps in hedges. That's interesting. I wonder why. I would have thought, depends on what kind of an energy line it is, but if I would have thought it would be the opposite effect on the vegetation. No, I haven't done anything in Devon. I live in the Czech Republic these days, and everything I do is either done here or when I'm on holiday. So I've done a little bit in Croatia, and I've done a little bit of dowsing in East Yorkshire when I've been home to Hull to see family and that kind of thing. And one of these days, I'd love to come over to the UK and visit some of the. Yeah, I'd like to douse some of the Michael and Mary line, for example. I think that would be a lot of fun, and compare that to the lines here. In terms of the energy line with the gaps in hedges and things, that suggests to me there might be a negativity to that line. Maybe it requires some healing, or maybe it's been misused, or maybe it's out of balance or something. That's just my gut feeling. Because usually what I find is the energy line, rather than inhibit plant growth, seems to be good for it. On the other hand, I have been to a couple of places, one of which is the Gates to Hell here in the Czech Republic, which is Rad Hoska. And there is a very strong negative energy. And I do believe that's because people in the past have played with blocking off the energy lines and played with the energies for nefarious purposes. And it needs cleaning up. The problem is that nobody's going to let you clean it up, because the people that own it are making such a good living off the tourism associated with the Gates to Hell. And who blames them, I suppose. Anyway, any more questions? Seems like the path was an energy line. Wouldn't surprise me. Actually, that brings up an interesting point, because one of the things I try to do in the book is just build a common lexicon of terms. And when I talk about a ley line and an alignment, I have some specific meaning in mind. For me, an alignment is a pair of male and female lines that follow an azimuth, and as they do so, they run like sine waves, and where they cross back, on the sine wave, is where the nodes are. And if you take each of the nodes and map them and draw a line through them, that usually is a straight line, or close to a straight line, and that is what I call a ley line. So a ley line isn't an energy line. A ley line is the straight azimuth through the nodes of two energy lines on an alignment. That's my definition that I use, just for future reference. Okay, well, I'll give another minute to see if there are any other questions or comments, and then I'll rest my voice, because I'm still not well. And for those of you that did join me, thank you very much. I'm really, really chuffed that anybody at all joined me, quite frankly, and quite delighted that people are interested. Well, it does seem like the questions have dried up. I would encourage you, obviously not everybody's got the cash to buy a book, but I would encourage you to buy the book, because I'm trying to get a point across. I'm trying to encourage people to get engaged with connecting with the land, as I call it, through this weird web of earth energies. And I'm trying to help people understand why this is important, spiritually, both as an individual and as humanity. I think it's why I was born to do this. I think it's really important, particularly now. So with that, I'll love you and I'll leave you, as we say in Yorkshire. Thanks for joining me. I do appreciate it. Yeah. Mr. Watkins, absolutely. So I appreciate you joining me. I will now say good night, good day, wherever you are, and happy dowsing. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.